Hello plant people, how are you guys doing today? If you're new around here, my name's Ashley and I'm a soil scientist. On this channel, I like to take that science and apply it to all things plants. So in today's video, we're talking about carnivorous plants, and this is actually part of the creepy crawly series, but in kind of the Halloween vibe. But it's also a highly requested video that I have gotten from some of you subscribers. There are so many new subscribers in the last little bit here, I'd say in the last week-ish. So if you guys could let me know in the comments below where you're from and kind of what content you're interested in, that would be awesome. I don't exist without you, so I definitely need your guys' feedback to make this channel better. I'm not the only person on this channel. It also revolves around you guys. So, and it literally, the purpose of the channel is for you. So mildly for my entertainment, because I actually do really enjoy making these videos. So let me know in the comments down below what you guys want to see, or just something as simple as where you're from and what your zone is, because regardless if it's houseplants or gardening, it does matter when it comes to science, because that's what we do with this channel. Everything is science-based. So let's get into the video. I'm wearing glasses today. Fun fact about me, I'm actually incredibly blind. And I hate contacts because I actually I'll rip them out of my eyeballs all the time. So I'm gonna wear my glasses for this recording. If you absolutely are deeply disturbed by the ring light effect on my glasses, just let me know and I'll stop wearing them. I'll go back to contacts. But for today, my eyes are really bugging me. I've got allergies and it wasn't happening. So I am wearing my glasses and I apologize. So in today's video, we're going to be talking about the Nepenthes, and this is one type of carnivorous plant that you can own as a houseplant. And if you like to see videos on other types of carnivorous plants, please let me know. I am more than happy to do them. But this one in particular they're literally one of my favorite. I have quite a few here today that I'm going to show you. I'm not going to show you my boring Ventricosa ones, but I am going to show you some of my otter types that I have, all the way from little baby size to more of an adult form. So let's get into the video. We're going to be talking about care, all the way to things that people don't talk about but I do think is necessary. Things like humidity, pitcher formation, you name it. Let's just hop in and get right into the nitty gritty. So with my plant specific videos, what I'm going to do, because this is actually one of my first zoom in on one specific species of plant, I'm going to start with the roots, and I'm literally just going to work my way up the anatomy of the plant. I think this is probably the best way to make sure we hit all the bases, from things like root rot and odd stuff, all the way to leaf formation and pitcher formation. So that is the format we are going to follow. So that means if you're just looking for pitcher formation rather than root rot symptoms, you need to fast forward further into the video. I'm going to try to remind myself to put timestamps in, but if I forget and someone gets to that point in the video, just leave it in the comments, because I'm forgetful. So one of the most common misconceptions about these plants is that they're actually epiphytic, which is not the case. They are not all epiphytic plants. Epiphyte, or an epiphytic plant, is actually something that is grown soillessly. So it doesn't need to root into the ground, and it can grow on things like tree barks. An orchid, a Phalaenopsis orchid in particular, is a good example of an epiphyte. These guys are not epiphytes. That is a common misconception with them, and I actually think that's also the reason why a lot of people end up killing them, is because they treat them like an orchid rather than a bog plant, which is what they are. These guys are known to grow in incredibly acidic soil, so the more degraded, the better. They typically are found in very moist, boggy areas, and they are on the edge of an anaerobic soil, but not quite. And when I say anaerobic, I mean when you start getting, say, in a peat bog, for example, the farther you get down into that soil layer, the less oxygen that's present. That's why peat bogs do not, the lower you get down into them, they don't tend to decompose stuff very well. That's the reason why you see people pulling out entire mammoths or saber-toothed tigers out of the bottom of bogs is because there's very little oxygen. So therefore, very little plant material or animal matter, human matter for that matter, do not deteriorate. So they're on the precipice where it's anaerobic, but they reside kind of in the fluffier, not yet anaerobic, but still acidic due to the decomposition above that layer. That's kind of where these guys hang out. Based on where they survive, they have a very unique and interesting root design that I personally am in love with. It is a root design that you do not see in a lot of plants, so that's what makes it so cool to me anyways. If you look, I'm going to insert some photos because I'm not going to dig out my Nepenthes just to show you the roots, but I'll show you some photos of what Nepenthes look like, Nepenthes root systems look like. You're going to notice that it is a very shallow, fibrous root system. So there's no taproot to it, and there's not even a lot of depth to it. It usually just crawls along the surface. And the reason for that is because it's avoiding that anaerobic area while surviving in the aerobic area, but you will also notice there's not a lot of root hairs on this plant. So the little tiny fuzzy offshoots don't exist with the Nepenthes, and the reason for that is because it lives in very saturated soil, very heavily saturated soil, under very moist conditions with not a lot of oxygen and not a lot of porosity. And so when you end up with an environment like that, you don't need root hairs. Root hairs actually inhibit your growth and will lead to rot because you have more surface area that needs more air, and therefore it'll begin to rot away. So that is a very unique feature to this plant. So when you look at the root system, you're going to also notice not only does it not have root hairs, but they're black. And black roots typically to a normal person would signify root rot, but that's not the case with these guys. The blackness of that root is actually due to the heavy amount of tannic acid or tannins that are in that soil, in that bog area. Because it typically lives in a very moist environment, very acidic soil, so there's lots of degrading organic material, it tends to dye the outer sheath or the outside of the root, causing that really dark appearance. So if you ever unroot a Nepenthes thinking that it has root rot or something of that nature, check it and actually feel the roots and tug on them. If they're not falling apart when you tug on them, they're absolutely fine. That black look is completely normal. So that brings me into the next thing. The idea of root rot with Nepenthes is kind of a gray area. You will not be able to see it with this plant. It is not going to be obvious due to the coloration and just the odd roots in general. They already look very sticky, like stick branch-like, with very little life to them. And that's just because of the nature of the medium that they're growing in. So because you can't see root rot with Nepenthes, the only way to know if your Nepenthes actually has root rot is to smell it. So what you would need to do to confirm root rot versus just normal growth or something else is happening is you would actually have to pull the Nepenthes out of the pot and then break away the potting soil. So if you're using, we'll get into that, what you should be using, but whatever you're using, pull it apart and give it a sniff. On this channel, I sniff a lot of things. It's actual soil scientist's way of knowing the quality of your soil. So give it a sniff. If it smells acidic or degraded, then you probably do have root rot, or you have just heavily degraded potting medium, and it's regardless, either way, it's time to actually change the medium. It should always smell earthy. An earthy smell is the smell that you're looking for a heavy or for a healthy potting soil with the Nepenthes plant. It is very unlikely to end up with root rot with these plants under high moisture just because of how those roots are designed. Like I said, there's not a lot of root hairs. It's a very wiry type root. It has a very unique design unto itself. So root rot is not common. The only time that you will end up with root rot in a Nepenthes scenario is actually if there was a bacteria that is targeted towards Nepenthes roots, or your soil itself has become so degraded that there's a high bacterial load that is not beneficial to the plant. Those are the only two scenarios. So the chances of you getting a bacteria specific to Nepenthes attack is very limited, especially if you're living in Canada or in any sort of cold climate. But if you have degraded soil, then that may be the case. And if that is the issue you're running into, literally just repot it in fresh potting soil. Give those roots a rinse. You do not have to hydrogen peroxide them or anything crazy, and just put them in some fresh medium. So moving up into the upper portions of the plant, it's very reminiscent of a philodendron when they get a little bit older. So this guy's, I would say he's like a teenager to me. He's not super old, he's not super young though either, but you can see he's got a philodendron vibe to it. So he reminds me of my Burl Marx type growing habit, and they all kind of do this same growing habit. So you can see it's a very viney plant. However, they do not send out air roots. I've never had, in my case, I've never had any air roots coming off of Nepenthes. I don't think that's a normal thing. And I do have these guys in relatively high humidity. We'll get into that a little bit later, but as you can see, that's kind of what he looks like, and I'll be talking about this sort of stuff. I didn't clean up any of these plants because I want to give you guys a very real look of what these plants will look like as adults or just throughout their entire stage. So there's two type of growth habits that can happen with this kind of vining plant. The first one is hanging, so you can actually put it in a hanging basket and it will trail down. Now, if you choose to do that, that trailing vine is very snappable, it's very rigid, and it's not like a pothos or Philodendron Brazil. It's not malleable in any way. If you bend it too much, it will snap. So if you're choosing to put these in a hanging basket in a window, just make sure it's in a safe place away from cats and kids or you yourself bumping it, because they will snap, and they do snap relatively easy. Another thing to note is that these guys can get huge. Their vines can get up to 10 meters in length. So if that is what you are going for, you may want to look into actually staking them. So this guy that I keep showing you, I'm going to need to stake him very soon because he's about to go this way. And all my Nepenthes, I actually like to go upwards. I have only one in a hanging basket, and that one that I do have is in an area where no animals or humans are going to get to him. So I do need to stake this guy. He's currently growing in a terrarium, but that is the plan for that one. If you choose to get Nepenthes seeds or maybe a rosetta, so an actual little rosette bud is how they grow when they're just little bee-buzz, you can do that. These are probably the best way to get them when they are small. If you give these guys adequate lighting, they actually do grow pretty quickly, as long as you're not running into any, issues with humidity or anything like that. And we'll get into that a little bit later, but they do form a rosetta. So this guy, I should have filmed this before he came out of rosetta stage, but you see, if I can get my camera to focus. So you see this little kind of two leaves here. That's the first progression out of the rosetta phase. But all these darker little tiny buds that you have, you see how they're kind of like in a circle, and they're just like 1, 2, 3, 4, and then there's 4 underneath that, and then you see this little vine coming out. So this is the rosetta stage, everything below this initial vine. So now we're coming out of childhood and we're moving into a bit more of an adult phase with this guy, and right now he is also in a terrarium setting, but that's kind of what happens. Juvenile to adult, they start coming out of this dark kind of compact looking plant and turning into more of a vining vibe type plant. So the part that most of you are probably waiting for is the actual pitcher formation phase. So I'm just gonna grab one of these guys here. So this is a bit larger, and I'm going to give you guys a bit of a closer look at these plants later. I'm going to go through them just a little bit better with you guys. You can see I've got one pitcher here, and this is what makes these guys so cool and all the rage. And so I have him, I've got one that's toast here, an older one. I've got another older one over here. So off of every single leaf here, we have a pitcher formation. These pitchers are not flowers. It is simply an extension of the leaf, and it is kind of like a little organ leaf hanging off of it. What happens inside these pitchers is we have a lip, and I'm not going to be able to get a good photo of this right now, but I'll try to insert some shots of it. But you have a lip, and on this lip, it actually secretes a sugar. From this sugar, bugs are attracted to it, and bugs will, over time, go in to try to eat off that lip, but there's hairs inside of that, and the hairs are all facing downward, so when the bug tries to get out, it can't. It's always forced farther down. It can't actually escape once it's gone inside. At the bottom of this little leaf organ is liquid, and that liquid has digestive enzymes in it, and those digestive enzymes digest the bug, which then fuels the fire to grow this plant. So, do you need to feed a Nepenthes plant, or any carnivorous plant for that matter? You can if you want. It does not hurt it. It's fun to do. Go ahead. Doesn't really matter. Don't fill the pitchers up, but just you can. It's not a big deal. Another popular thing that people like to do is actually fill the pitchers with water. And I urge you not to do this. The reason being is because the Nepenthes naturally puts its own liquid into the pitcher itself. And when you put water in it, while you think you're helping it out, you're actually just diluting that enzyme. So it's essentially like the stomach acid in our stomachs. If we added a bunch of water to it, we're going to dilute it over time, and we're not going to be as adapted towards actually digesting that food. So I urge you not to fill them with water. It's not a great idea. Not only that, they actually get really heavy when you fill them with water, and they will plop over, and sometimes they'll actually rip. In the wild, in my mind, I think to myself that these probably aren't getting rainwater in them either. And the reason for that, a reason why I think that, is because there's a cap on the top of this, if you can see this cap. And with the way that this plant hangs, that cap literally is in the position to deflect any water that may try to get into these pitchers. So it's just, I just don't see naturally water getting into these pitchers regardless. So I think that cap is actually there to protect against rainwater from getting inside the pitcher and then diluting that enzyme. For pitcher formation, it's going to depend on the type of plant you have. So whether it's a Lowland or a Highland Nepenthes. I'm going to get into that specifics a little bit later, but that is what your determining factor is. All night Nepenthes are a mix of Lowland and Highland, but if you're in a cold climate, Highland is going to be your better bet. But we'll get into that a little bit later. For pitcher formation, you need at least a humidity of 60%. And this whole room, actually in general, just because of the fish tanks and Ella and my greenhouse and all that stuff, is always at a 60, sometimes slightly higher. And then my ambient temperature is around room temperature. I actually don't keep it very hot in here. So the room itself is always at a very high humidity. That is why I get pitcher formation. If you don't have high humidity, or you need even higher humidity, then I suggest getting a terrarium, which is what this one is right here. This is a carnivorous plant slash other odd plants that are a pain in my butt live in this. That is where they hang out. So pitcher formation, if you are not forming pitchers, and you're just getting these runners that turn into nothing, it is because you either do not have enough light or you do not have high enough humidity. Those are the only two factors that factor into that. If you are successful in pitcher formation, it is going to come in two stages. The first stage is going to be this very odd little P on the end, and then it's going to turn into something like this. So the P is going to start swelling and flattening out, and then eventually it'll just continue from there on out. If you've lost pitchers on leaves, they will not come back. So once they've degraded and they've lived their life and moved on, there's no way to put pitchers back on those old leaves. It's done. Fun fact about these pitchers is that some can get up to 4 feet long, like 4 feet in height is how big some of these pitchers can get. And then they can range all the way to super stubby little baby ones, which are really neat as well. These pitchers are known to eat bugs, but they're also known to eat small birds and small reptiles and amphibians and all that fun stuff. So kind of cool, but yeah, they'll eat small animals. That's also kind of a fun fact. So let's get into more of the needs of these plants. I pot all mine in either peat moss, not peat moss based potting soil, straight sphagnum peat moss, or I'll put them in sphagnum moss. So this stuff right here is what it looks like. That is what I pot these guys in. That is it. That is all. I do not put them in potting medium. I do not put perlite in. I do not do bark. I don't do anything like that. I repot them when my soil begins to smell acidic. That means it is time to change up my game. You want these plants to be in the most inert soil possible because they do not have those root hairs on them. And just because of their general nature of where they grow, they're used to soil that is essentially nutrient free. And the moment you put them into a scenario where it has fertilizer or any kind of salt content in it, they will perish very quick. They are incredibly salt sensitive. That means you do not fertilize them and you do water with distilled water. That is your best bet, especially if you're looking for rapid growth, healthy pitcher formation, healthy roots. Distilled water is the way to go. I have watered them with my ventricosa, for example. I water with tap water because it's a very common, not rare, not expensive Nepenthes. You can water with that, but it will stunt its growth, and I have noticed that with my ventricosa anyways. I also do not want the soil ever to break down. And that is very important. I always keep mine moist. I do not wait between waterings whatsoever. But when I do water, I'm ensuring that I'm laying on the water enough that I'm actually flooding the system and that the water is then escaping through the bottom. The reason for that is because I'm reducing the salt buildup, whatever may be naturally being released from the soil, all that stuff. I'm making sure it gets washed out. It also means that I'm washing out any unnecessary deterioration or bacteria buildup within the soil itself. Do not be scared to overwater these plants. I honestly think it's impossible. I've never overwatered a Nepenthes. The cool part about these plants is that they are low light tolerant. So while they may not form the biggest pitchers in low light, while they may not grow as quickly in low light, they are incredibly low light tolerant. I would put them on the same playing field as a snake plant, for example. Very similar type vibe. They do best in bright indirect light. They will do well under grow lights, especially if you're looking for that rapid growth and you're looking for pitchers on every single leaf, then that is definitely an option. So there are two types. There's the Lowland and the Highland. The Lowland type species, I'll put a resource down below that you guys can go check out that actually rates what elevation that these Nepenthes are found at. I found it when I was doing research for this video and I actually really liked it. So you guys can check that out if you have Nepenthes and you're not sure where it sits on the scale. But lowland species is anything below 3,000 feet and Highland species is anything above 3,000 feet. So let's start off with the Highland species. Highland species like to be at room temperature, typically like 21 degrees, 70 degrees Fahrenheit, in and around that range. They are a mix of sun and shade, but they can do well in both for the most part. And they are incredibly cold tolerant. In some cases, they're actually frost tolerant, so that's kind of interesting. And they love Canadian climates, so they like our cooler climates. They do very well in our cooler climates. For the lowland species under 3,000 feet, as we move down the mountain, You can imagine that the heat begins to go up, so we're around that 32 degrees Celsius or 90 degrees Fahrenheit. Our humidity also skyrockets, sometimes getting up to 100% humidity. Because of that, these lowland species are incredibly heat tolerant, not so cold tolerant, and they do better in an American or a southern states type environment. If you guys have any sort of questions about Nepenthes or just like the general care or something that I didn't answer about them, then please let me know. But for right now, we're going to move on to my collection. My collection, like I said, I've never overwatered and their soil is always moist. I keep some in terrariums, I keep others not in terrariums. The ones I keep in terrariums literally are only because they can fit in terrariums. Eventually they will stop fitting in terrariums, I can promise you that. They get too large at some points. And then my humidity inside the terrarium is probably 90. Outside of the terrarium is around 60. They are a mix of undergrow lights versus not undergrow lights. So undergrow lights, I do find I get pictures on nearly every single leaf. If I don't have them under grow lights, I find that I will get them like probably every second or third. It does make a bit of a difference for me. So I brought out 3 odd ones that I have that I enjoy, all at different life stages that I'm going to show you. So the first one is Nepenthes fusca. So you can tell between the lime green versus this darker green. The darker green is the Rosetta stage, and then this lighter green is actually the beginning of the growth stage. And I can pull this guy out. I did pull him out of his area, but you can see his roots are very shallow and there's not much there compared to the plant, and that is normal. That is completely normal for this, for a Nepenthes. So I just want to show you guys that. Very fibrous, very dark, not a lot of root hairs, a very stringy type looking thing. So I just have him in here. Smells earthy, not rotted, and this is damp. It is very damp type growing medium, but all this is sphagnum moss. I don't have any water hanging out on the bottom, but I do have sphagnum moss in here. And then he literally just sits in here. So I don't have him heavily rooted or anything. This is just normally how he is in there. Well, he's actually a Highland Lowland mix. He can do well in both. And he is from Borneo, I believe. So that is kind of where they natively grow. And I'll insert a photo of what he looks like as an adult. The next one is my Nepenthes Atlas. Anyways, he's an Atlas. He's a Highland species. He's got red pitchers eventually. And this guy I have, he's more of a juvenile now. He's grown quite a bit, and I will have to stake him. He came from the nursery with one pitcher that looks like this. Since then it's shriveled up and gone away. That is very normal after transporting them or getting them in or shipped in. That is a very normal thing to have. He also, wherever he wasn't under a grow light, so you can see here my internodes are very long from where he came from, but now that he's under a grow light and he's under a little bit more intense sun, my internodes have decreased substantially since he's come into my possession. So I got him around here. So since then, my internodes have basically crushed together, and that is because he is under a very high light. I have had some issues with this guy and humidity. Initially, I had him in a terrarium with the top on, and I believe that was too high of humidity, which is what caused this odd leaf formation here. So I decided not to pull this off because I actually want to show you guys what this looks like. And then I also have a very similar cup on this side that's done that, and the tip of this cup that's done that. Since then, I have brought the humidity down for him. He was at about 90, he's about at 70 at this point, and this has obviously not spread or continued. So too high of humidity is a possibility, and you will end up with this type look. And again, he is in the sphagnum moss potting soil, and he's very happy, very healthy little guy. And the last one is Nepenthes Viking. So he has not only little tiny compact pitchers, where's the one? Just these little tiny stubby pitchers, which are very cool. He also has spider mites, which is a nightmare. So they can get bugs and they are not beneficial regardless if they're on a carnivore or not. You got to get rid of them. So he's being treated right now, currently. And he is in, what is he in? He is in what looks to be like reindeer moss. He's not in sphagnum moss, I can tell you that much. Oh, so he looks like he's in like a whatever the balls are, Carnivore balls. So it looks like he's in peat moss, and then on the outside there's like a reindeer moss on the outside. I have not repotted him since I've gotten him. He smells healthy and he doesn't need to be repotted or anything, but I haven't actually seen what's in here, what it looks like. This is what my leaves look like. Very unique leaves, and that's actually the point of why I got this Viking type one. So you can see it kind of looks like a mosaic almost. Very pretty. I find them very, very pretty. And yeah, so that is this guy. He's a Nepenthes Viking. He also is a Highland species, and he's in 60% humidity. Since I have him in 60%, I am starting to get some pitcher formation, and he's happy, he's healthy, he's putting out lots of new growth, and yeah, he's looking good. The Nepenthes aren't for everybody, but they're definitely for me. I like them. I think they're very cool. So that's all I have for you guys today on the Nepenthes plant. If you guys like this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up, hit that subscribe button down below, and let me know if you guys have any other questions about Nepenthes or what next carnivorous plant you would like a video on. And I will talk to you guys next time. Bye!